Hello and welcome back to Tidbit of Torah. Recently, I asked my daughter to go put on her jacket so we could leave the house, and she disappeared and came back, and she had her coat pulled up on her legs. And I just started cracking up because the truth is she had followed my instructions. I said, please go put on your jacket. And she had. I hadn't said, please go put your jacket on your arms. And it was a classic case, which I think so many of us have with our children, with our colleagues, with other people in our lives, in which we thought we had communicated. But the truth is we had only spoke and we hadn't really communicated what our intention was when we opened our mouth or we communicated in another format. I wonder what that might look like for you, whether that's in the work environment or whether that's at home or in other times. And this can be frustrating for us because we think that we are so clear in what we say. But the truth is that communication happens in so many forms, and communication can also break down so easily. This week's Torah portion, we learn about the power of communication and the difference between speaking and communicating. In Leviticus chapter 21, the first verse of our Torah portion, we read, Vayomer Adonai el Moshe Emor el HaKohanim b'nei Aharon ve'amarta alehem. And Adonai said to Moses, Adonai said to Moses, speak to the priests, the sons of Aaron, and say to them, and then it goes on to say, none shall defile others, and it goes on to the rest of the Torah portion. The construction of this verse is different than what we usually get, and that strikes the rabbis across time and also strikes us today as therefore significant, because usually a verse like this would begin vayidaber, not vayomer as it does here, but vayidaber, as in dalid bet resh, that root, which also means to speak. Normally it would be vayidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, and here we get vayomer Adonai el Moshe emor. And so there's an emphasis on the word emor, which comes from the root Aleph mem resh, meaning to say, or today I actually want to translate emor as to communicate, as Rabbi Lorraine Enlow does. Because I think that part of what this Torah is teaching us for today is the power of communicating, of not just speaking, and being able to distinguish when we actually are communicating our message, our values, our hopes and dreams, our love, our concerns to the people in our lives, and not just speaking them or writing them, but actually communicating in a way they can be heard. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, I think we have to acknowledge the communication happens in so many different ways. Often, for example, we put such an emphasis on what we say, but then we put less emphasis on our body language, which as we work with and teach children, we realize is so important. Infants pick up on facial expressions, smiles, frowns, from the beginning of their lives, and so do other people. The difference when someone talks to you and they give you eye contact, or whether or not they're looking distracted at their phone or looking away. When someone is hunched over or leaned back versus when someone is smiling and leaning in to listen. The difference when someone interrupts you versus really listens. The difference in terms of whether one stops to listen to what you say versus keeps on going. Or the difference when someone uses their name when they talk to you versus not. Also, the difference between when someone keeps you in communication versus when there might be missing conversations and you have to guess and fill in the gaps. And so there's so many ways when we really think about it that we can communicate verbally, written, body language, also by not communicating or silence in times that are all powerful forms of communication. And I think this week's Torah portion, Parashat Emor, is a powerful reminder that forces us to ask the question of when are we speaking and when are we really communicating? And what does it take for us to really communicate to our children, to our parents, to our colleagues, to the people in our lives whom we want to be clear in terms of what are we asking of them, what are we offering, what are we promising, how are we trying to inform them or to involve them in our lives. And if we feel like upon reflection that maybe we're not really communicating, that I wonder how we might take a step back and think about how we're using our body, our words, our expressions, our amount of communication to be able to communicate what we need to, and to also to be able to get curious about maybe what someone else is trying to communicate to us, and ask some questions about that if it feels like maybe more speaking than actually communicating. I want to wish you a Shabbat Shalom, and I hope while we are in this Omer period from the second night of Passover until Shavuot, a time in which we embrace the growth mindset, that we can consider how it is that we might communicate better to those in our lives that need us to be a little bit more clear, and that how we can find a little bit of humor and grace at times that communication may break down, whether that's over coats or over cocktails, to be able to move forward with a spirit of compassion, humor, and grace. Shabbat Shalom.